Chapter 1. The Storm That Never Learned to End. Somewhere around you, the light has already gone soft, or you have made it that way on purpose. The lamp turned low, the screen dimmed. The last few edges of the day allowed to blur at last into something you no longer have to look at directly. That is a good thing to have done. You do not need to finish the day cleanly tonight. Days rarely finish cleanly anyway, no matter how firmly we decide they should, and there is a particular kind of rest that only becomes available once you stop trying to tie the last loose thread of it into a neat little knot before you are allowed to lie down. Feel where your body is resting right now, the weight of your head, wherever it is settled, the line of your shoulders finally dropping the half-inch they have been holding all day without your permission. There is nothing here that needs carrying. Whatever you brought to this hour, a worry with no clear shape, a conversation you have replayed one time too many, a small ache somewhere behind the eyes that has followed you around since the afternoon. You can loosen your grip on all of it now, slowly, the way you had set down something heavy you had simply gotten so used to holding that you forgot it was ever optional to put it down. This is the Lord Den, and what follows tonight is a long, slow story about a world so old that the beginning of it has already been forgotten by almost everyone still living inside it. There is no part of tonight where you are expected to keep up. If your attention drifts, let it drift. If your eyes close somewhere in the first hour and do not open again until the gray light of morning, that is not you missing the story. That is the story doing exactly what it was built to do. Nothing here has to be remembered. It only has to keep you company for a while, the way a low fire keeps a room company, asking nothing of you except that you stay near it and let it burn down in its own time. Tonight the story is older than gods, older than the golden tree most of this world worships now, older than the queen who sits at the root of that tree, older than nearly every name that will eventually crowd its way into the histories people tell each other about how this world came to be. Before any of that, there were dragons. Not the way you might picture a dragon from a picture book, a beast to be slain by a knight so the knight can go home a hero. These were something closer to the weather itself, vast and ancient and indifferent, ruling the sky the way the sky has always ruled everything under it, without needing anyone's permission and without ever once explaining themselves. Wherever you are tonight, let them come to you slowly, out of a past so distant that even the world they ruled has trouble remembering it clearly. There is one dragon in particular this story is walking toward, though it will take us the whole of the night to reach him, and it should. His name is Placidusax, and he was a lord once, in an age before this one, when a different order ruled the sky and a different ring held the world together. He is still here, if you know where to look. He did not die when his age ended. He simply stopped, somewhere at the far edge of the world, in a broken temple where time itself came loose from its hinges, and he has been waiting there ever since, for a god who left him a very long time ago and is never, by any honest reading of what survives, going to come back. Hold on to that image gently as you drift tonight. A lord older than the current world, standing motionless in a storm that never ends, still faithfully waiting for someone who is already gone. This is Elden Ring, though not the version made of boss fights and health bars and the long gray walk back to whatever just killed you. This is the version underneath that one, the version made of half sentences carved into old spears, of a single line spoken by a beast who barely remembers how to speak, of temples floating in a sky that fell apart so long ago it has forgotten how to finish falling. It is a gentler thing than the game ever lets you feel while you are playing it, sword in hand, heart pounding, thinking only about surviving the next few seconds. Tonight there is nothing to survive. Nothing is circling overhead, waiting for you to make a mistake. You only have to lie still and breathe and let a very old sky drift slowly over you while you fall asleep beneath it. Maybe some part of what follows will feel familiar anyway, even wrapped in all these strange old names. The feeling of belonging to an age that has already ended and not quite knowing what to do with yourself now that it has. The feeling of waiting faithfully for something or someone long past the point where waiting still makes any sense. You do not need it to be as vast as a dragon or as old as a fallen sky for the shape of it to land somewhere quiet in you. If any of it does land there tonight, let it land softly, and then let it go, the way you are letting go of everything else right now. This is not a lesson. It is only a very old story, told slowly, about what happens to those who are left behind when the world moves on without them. Let us begin the way all the oldest stories begin, long before anyone thought to write any of it down. Before there was gold in the sky, there was thunder, and the thunder had wings. Chapter 2. Before there was gold in the sky. To understand the dragons, you have to first understand that the world you may already know a little of, the one ruled by a great golden tree and the queen enthroned within its light, is not the first world this place has ever been. It is at least the second. Perhaps, if you follow the faintest threads all the way down, it is something even further along than that. The land beneath the Erd-tree is old in a way that keeps surprising anyone patient enough to go looking. Layer beneath layer, each one built on the ruins of the one before it, each one convinced, while it lasted, that it was the whole and permanent shape of reality. None of them were. This is the first thing worth carrying gently into tonight. Every order this world has ever raised believed it would be the last one, and every one of them was wrong. In one of those older ages, before the golden tree rose and rewrote the sky, the dragons ruled. Not as kings ruling subjects exactly, since the dragons do not seem to have wanted anything so small as a throne. They ruled the way a mountain rules the valley beneath it, simply by being enormous and ancient and there, older than the questions anyone might have thought to ask them. Their scales were said to be hard as iron, harder even than the finest work any smith in the later ages would ever manage, and their breath carried the raw force of the storm, red lightning splitting a sky that belonged, in those years, entirely to them. Picture that sky for a moment before you drift. A world with no golden light in it at all, only cloud and stone and the slow beat of vast wings, and the distant roll of thunder that was not weather, but a living thing passing overhead. The people of that older world did not fight the dragons, not at first. They worshipped them. This is worth pausing on a moment longer than the story strictly requires, because it tells you something about how power actually works in this world, underneath all the theology that came later. Faith here does not begin with love. It begins with something enormous that could destroy you, and, for reasons of its own, chooses not to, and the gratitude that particular mercy leaves behind. The dragons were the first gods this land ever knelt to, in the plainest sense of the word, because they were the first things powerful enough to make kneeling feel like the only sane response. A cult grew up around them, older than almost every other faith this world would go on to hold, built not on scripture, but on awe, on the simple, overwhelming fact of the dragons themselves. It is worth saying, before we go on, that even the dragons may not have been the very first thing. Underneath this world, older than almost any name, there is a memory the Golden Order likes least of all to discuss, a memory of a time when life had not yet been sorted into its neat and separate kinds. The oldest fragments call it the Crucible, the primordial furnace of living things. From the age when all of life was tangled together in a single churning shape, horns and scales and wings and roots and eyes, all folded into one another without the clean divisions the Golden Order would later insist upon. In that older understanding, a horn was not a deformity, and a wing was not a monstrosity. They were simply life in its first and truest form, before anyone had decided which shapes were holy and which were to be hidden away in shame. The dragons belong somewhere near that primordial furnace, closer to the raw first shape of living things than to the tidy order that came after, and part of why the Golden World feared them may be exactly that. They were a reminder of the beginning, of the time before the sorting, when the line between beast and god and monster had not yet been drawn. Remember that too, because this world will spend age after age drawing that line and calling everything on the wrong side of it an outcast, and the dragons were among the first great things it decided to place on the wrong side. That cult still exists, faintly, in the present day, long after the Age of Dragons ended. We will come to it later tonight, to the altars where the faithful still gather in the ruins, still eating what must be eaten to draw a little of that ancient power into their own failing bodies. For now it is enough to know that it began here, in the age when the dragons were not a memory or a monster, but the living rulers of the sky. And to worship them was not a strange or shameful thing, but the most natural act in the world. Remember that phrase, the most natural act in the world, because by the end of tonight it will have curdled into something much stranger and much sadder, and the distance between those two things is a large part of what this story is actually about. And ruling over all of it, over the dragons and the cult and the storm-racked sky, there was a lord. The dragons had a king of their own kind, the greatest of them, and his name, in the fragments that survive, is Placidusax. He was not merely the strongest dragon, though he was surely that. He was the Elden Lord of that age. Sit with the weight of that title for a moment, because it will matter enormously before the night is through. Elden Lord. The same title that the Queen's own consorts would later hold in the Golden Age to come, the highest office this world has to offer, the one every later war would eventually be fought over. Placidusax held it first. Before the gold, before the queen, before the tree, there was already an Elden Ring binding this world together, and there was already a lord who ruled beneath it. He simply happened to be a dragon. This is the piece that quietly rearranges everything else, if you let it. The Golden Order that rules the present day did not invent the shape of power it uses. It inherited that shape from something older and stranger than itself, and then it did what every new order does. It wrote the old one out of the histories, buried the previous ring beneath the roots of its new tree, and taught everyone still living that the world had always been golden, that there had never been anything before the light. The dragons were not defeated so much as they were overwritten, painted over, folded down into a legend about monsters so that no one would have to remember they had once been gods and lords, and the rightful holders of the very titles the new world would go on to kill each other for. There was a god above Placidusax, too, in that older age. Every lord in this world serves something. The golden consorts serve the queen, and the queen serves the great will that put her on her throne. Placidusax served a god of his own, a presence the surviving fragments describe only in the vaguest and most reverent terms, a lord of lords, a god without equal, whose very name has been lost so completely that not even the one who served it can seem to recall it clearly anymore. This is not an accident of poor record-keeping. It is closer to the center of the whole tragedy, a god so total that an entire age was built around serving it, and now the name of that god is simply gone, worn away by time the way a carving in soft stone eventually wears back down to a blank and featureless face. The lore does not resolve who this fell god truly was, or what it wanted, or why it mattered. What survives is only the shape of the absence it left behind, and the fact that its lord is still standing at his post, waiting, long after the god itself has vanished. It helps to say plainly, here at the start, the truth that this whole night will keep circling back to. The gods of this world are real, and not one of them cares about any particular person, or any particular dragon, or any particular age. The god Placidusax served did not stay. It did not send word. It did not, so far as anyone can tell. Spare a backward glance for the lord it left behind, or the age it let collapse. It simply left, for reasons of its own that were never explained to anyone small enough to need an explanation, the way these gods always do. The dragons learned that lesson first, before the demigods of the Golden Age would learn it in their turn. To be chosen by something vast is not to be loved by it. It is only to be used by it, for a while, until it finds it no longer has any use for you at all. Sleep well, if sleep is already reaching for you. When we return, we will go to the place where that abandoned lord still stands, a broken city adrift in a sky that came apart, where the storm has been breaking for longer than the golden world has even existed. Chapter 3: The Dragonlord Who Was Left Behind. Welcome back. Let your breathing slow all the way down until you are barely aware of it happening at all. Tonight we are going to spend a while in the company of the oldest lord this world still holds, and he is a patient one, so there is no need to hurry toward him. Let everything slow down around you to match his pace. The pace of something that has already been waiting so long that another hour or two makes no difference to it at all. At the far eastern edge of the world, higher than almost anything else this land still holds up toward the sky, there is a place called Crumbling Farum Azula. It is not a ruin in the ordinary sense, the way a fallen castle is a ruin, quietly settling into the grass over centuries. It is a ruin that is still, at this very moment, in the act of falling. Great slabs of ancient stone hang, suspended in the air, breaking apart and drifting, and never quite reaching the ground below, caught in a storm that has been tearing the whole city to pieces for longer than anyone can measure. Time does not run correctly here. It came loose from its moorings somewhere in the deep past, and now the city falls forever, without ever finishing the fall, an entire civilization frozen at the exact moment of its own destruction, held there, endlessly, in the eye of a storm that will not end. This was the seat of the dragons in their age. The architecture that survives is unmistakably built for enormous winged things. Wide platforms open to the sky, vast halls with no need for ordinary doors, a dragon temple at the heart of it all. The beastmen who still prowl its broken walkways are its guardians and its last living inhabitants. Ancient warriors who have kept their posts long after there was anything left worth guarding, fighting anyone who intrudes with a ferocity that has outlived every reason it once had. There is a great deal in this city that belongs to a different thread of this world's history, a black blade, a shackled guardian, a rune of death, and this telling will only touch those things lightly tonight, because they belong in full to other nights and other stories. Tonight, we are here for the dragon at the center of it, and for the vigil he has been keeping since before the Golden World was even a rumor. Placidusax is not hidden, exactly, but he is not easy to reach either. You come to him through a kind of tear in the world, a place where time has worn so thin that stepping through it takes you somewhere outside the ordinary running of hours entirely. And there, in a wide and silent space, at the eye of the endless storm, you find him. He is vast in a way that is difficult to hold in the mind all at once. A dragon with many heads rising from a single ancient body, coiled and still, so old and so motionless that at first he can be mistaken for part of the ruined architecture itself, another fallen slab of the dying city. He is not fallen. He is waiting. He has been waiting in that exact spot, by every honest reading of what the game gives us, since the god he served left the world, which is to say since, before nearly everything else in this entire history began. Let us ask the question this story asks of every figure it meets, gently and in order, because it is the only fair way to meet them. What does Placidusax want? The answer is almost unbearably simple. He wants his lord to come back. That is all. Not conquest, not vengeance, not the throne he once held, not even, so far as anyone can tell, to be remembered by the world that overwrote him. He wants the god he served, the nameless fell god of that older age, to return to a world that has moved on without either of them. And he has organized the whole of his endless existence around the possibility that it someday might. He does not appear to be angry about the waiting. He does not appear to be anything at all except present and faithful, and there holding a post that no one else in the whole of the world still remembers was ever assigned. What does wanting that cost him? Everything, though it is a quiet everything, the kind that does not announce itself. It cost him his age, which ended around him while he kept his vigil. It cost him the world, which was rebuilt in gold by powers that had no place for him and no interest in his patience. It cost him, in the end, even the certainty of what he is waiting for, since the name of his own God has worn away to nothing in all the time he has stood there, so that he now keeps faith with an absence he can no longer quite describe. And it cost him the simple dignity of an ending. Everything else from his age was allowed to finish, to fall, to be forgotten and grow quiet. He alone was not. He remains, caught like his city in the eye of the storm, unable to die and unwilling to leave, faithful past the point where faith has anything left to attach itself to. What does that cost reveal about the world he lives in? It reveals the oldest and hardest truth this world keeps trying to teach, and age after age, to anyone who will sit still long enough to hear it. Devotion is not answered here. The most complete loyalty this world has ever produced, a lord who has kept his post for longer than the current sky has existed, waiting for a god who will plainly never return, is met with exactly the same silence that meets everyone else. The god does not come. The god does not send word. The vigil is not rewarded, and it is not punished, and it is not even noticed. It simply goes on in the eye of a storm at the edge of a world that has forgotten it is happening. This is what it looks like when the most faithful figure in the whole of a history is devoted to something that does not deserve that devotion and cannot return it and would not return it even if it could. Sit with that for a moment. The oldest lord in the world is also its most loyal servant, and his loyalty has bought him nothing at all except the endless privilege of continuing to be loyal. There is a phrase that clings to Placidusax in the fragments that describe him, a description of him as a lord who awaits the return of his own lord. It is a small thing, a line you could pass over without noticing while you play, and it is one of the most quietly devastating lines this entire world contains once you understand what it is actually telling you. A being old enough to have ruled an age, powerful enough to have held the highest title this world offers, reduced by nothing but time and abandonment to a single unchanging act, the act of waiting, performed forever for someone who is not coming. That is the whole of his story, and it is more affecting, told plainly, than the entire elaborate rise and fall of most of the kingdoms that came after him. He is not a monster guarding a treasure. He is a widower who never got to bury anyone, standing at a grave with no body in it, keeping a promise to a god who forgot he existed. It is worth being honest, too, about what remains genuinely uncertain here, because the story does not resolve all of it, and this telling will not pretend that it does. We do not truly know why his lord left. We do not know the god's name, or its nature, or whether it fled some disaster, or simply lost interest, or was destroyed by something we never see. Some readings hold that the fell god was cast down when the new Golden Order rose, that the Age of Dragons ended in a war it lost. Other readings hold that the god left first, of its own accord, and that the Age of Dragons collapsed only afterward, in the absence its leaving created. Both readings exist, and the game does not tell you which is true. What it gives you instead is only the aftermath, the Lord still standing, the storm still breaking, the name still lost. Perhaps the reason matters, perhaps it does not. Either way, the waiting is the same. There is a temptation, meeting the Dragonlord, to try to rescue him with a theory, to decide once and for all what his god was, and where it went, and whether it might yet return, as though solving the puzzle would somehow ease the grief of it. The story gently refuses to let you do that. It gives you a lord, and a vigil, and a lost name, and it declines to fill in the rest. And the more time you spend with him, the more you come to understand that the missing answer is not a gap in the story, but the whole of it. Placidusax does not know why his god left either. He has had longer than the world itself to wonder, and he has not arrived at an answer, and he waits anyway. His faith does not depend on understanding. That is what makes it faith, and that is what makes it almost unbearable to look at directly. He is not waiting because he has been promised a return. He is waiting because the waiting itself is the last thing that still connects him to the God he served, and he would rather keep that connection, empty as it is, than admit there is nothing left on the other end of it at all. Rest now. When we return, we will step further into that endless storm and look more closely at the dying city itself, at the frozen sky that holds it, and at what it means that an entire age can be caught forever at the single most ruinous moment of its own long life. Chapter 4: The City That Falls Forever. Welcome back. Settle in, wherever you are, and let the last of the day's noise settle with you. We are going to stay a while longer in crumbling Azula because there is something in the way that place is built, or rather in the way it is endlessly coming apart, that says a great deal about this world and the things it does to those it leaves behind. Let everything slow. There is nowhere we need to be tonight except here, drifting in a sky that fell down long ago and never landed. Picture the city as it must have been before the storm took it, back when the dragons still ruled, and this was the beating heart of their age. It would have been immense beyond ordinary scale, a place built by and for beings the size of weather, its halls and platforms opening freely onto the open air, because the ones who lived here had no need of stairs or narrow doors. There would have been light of some kind, and sound, the vast, slow movement of enormous wings, the deep resonance of voices too large and too old for any smaller throat to imitate. It would have felt, to anything small enough to visit it, like standing inside the machinery of the sky itself. This was not a fortress hiding from the world. It was the center of the world, the place from which the world was ruled, in the age when the ones doing the ruling had scales and wings and breath made of lightning. And now it falls. The storm that holds Azula is not an ordinary storm, and the falling is not an ordinary collapse. The stone breaks apart and drifts and hangs in the air, and then, impossibly, does not complete the descent. Held in place by the same wrongness in time that keeps Placidusax from either dying or leaving. The whole city is frozen at the moment of its destruction, not before it, when it was whole, and not after it, when it would finally be at rest as ruins, but during, in the single most ruinous instant of its long existence, held there without release. It is one thing to fall. Everything falls eventually. It is another thing entirely to be caught in the act of falling and denied the ground, to be kept forever at the exact moment when everything you were is coming apart and cannot quite finish coming apart. That is the particular horror of this place, if you slow down long enough to feel it. Not death. The refusal of death. The endless postponement of an ending that would at this point be a mercy. The beastmen who guard it understand this better than anyone, though they can no longer say so. They are ancient warriors, powerful and swift, and they defend the broken walkways of the city with a ferocity that has long outlasted any cause. There is no one left to protect here. The dragons are gone, or nearly so, scattered and diminished across a world that forgot them. The god is gone. The age is over. And still the guardians fight, because fighting is what they were made to do, and the making of them did not include any instruction for what to do once the thing they guarded had ceased to exist. This is worth sitting with rather than rushing past. Every order this world builds produces its own kind of outcast, and here is one of the oldest and loneliest of them all, a warrior class kept at their posts by nothing but the shape of a duty whose object has vanished. They are not evil. They are not even, in any meaningful sense, still soldiers. They are the muscle memory of a dead loyalty, twitching on forever in an empty house. It is worth noticing, too, how many of this world's later horrors trace their roots back to this single frozen city, though the Golden Order that inherited them would never say so aloud. The refusal of a proper ending, the thing that torments Faramazula, becomes, in a slightly different form, one of the great unresolved wounds of the age that follows. When death itself is sealed away, and the dead are no longer permitted to truly die. The Dragon Storm Frozen City is where you can first see the shape of that idea, the idea that an ending withheld is not a gift but a curse, that to be denied your own conclusion is among the cruelest things this world knows how to do to anyone. The Golden Age would go on to do it deliberately, as policy, to an entire world. Here, in the Older Age, it seems almost to have happened by accident, a side effect of whatever tore time loose in the first place. But the lesson is already fully present, waiting to be learned, in the way the stone hangs unfalling in the air. There is a great dragon here too, in the storm, apart from Placidusax, a guardian of the temple who takes wing against anyone who climbs too high. And there are hints everywhere in the architecture and the relics of just how central the dragons once were to everything, how the later world's own most sacred things were built on foundations the dragons laid first. The lightning that the Golden Knights would come to wield as a holy weapon was, at its root, the dragon's own storm, borrowed and renamed and dressed in new theology, its origin quietly filed away. This is a pattern you will see again and again once you know to look for it. The new order does not truly invent its power. It takes the old power, the dragon's storm, the older ring, the previous age's titles, and it relabels all of it as its own, and then it teaches everyone to forget where any of it actually came from. The dragons were the first to have this done to them. They would not be the last. Consider, for a moment, what it would mean to live inside this city as it is now. To exist at the eye of a storm that never breaks and never clears, in a place where the light does not change because the hour does not advance, where the same slabs of stone break away and drift and hang in the same positions they have held for longer than the golden world has existed. There would be no mornings. There would be no nights, not real ones, only the perpetual dim churn of the storm. Nothing would ever heal, because healing requires time to pass, and time does not pass here. Nothing would ever be finished for the same reason. It is a place built entirely out of a single suspended moment, and the moment it is suspended in is the most ruinous one the city ever had. If you have ever felt yourself stuck inside a single bad hour that would not end, replaying it, unable to move forward out of it into whatever comes next, then you already understand Faramazula better than most of the scholars who study it. It is that feeling, made into a place and then made to last forever, and through all of it, at the center, the Lord keeps his vigil. Placidusax does not seem to mind the storm. Why would he? The storm is only the outward shape of the thing he has already accepted inward, the refusal of an ending, the endless holding of a single moment. He was waiting before the city began to fall, and he will be waiting long after anyone who comes to disturb him has gone. There is something almost peaceful in it, if you do not look too closely. An old lord resting in a place that matches him perfectly, a frozen guardian in a frozen city under a frozen sky. It is only when you remember what he is actually waiting for, and that it is not coming, that the peace curdles back into grief. Both things are true simultaneously. His vigil is the most serene thing in this entire violent world, and it is also its most complete and hopeless sorrow. And neither of those truths cancels the other out. Sleep well. When we return, we will come down out of the frozen sky and into the present day, to the altars where the dragon's old worship still flickers on, and to the terrible price the faithful now pay to borrow even a little of the power the dragons once wore as easily as their own scales. Chapter 5: The Communion of Hearts. Welcome back. Let everything slow down around you a little further, the way it does in the last quiet stretch before sleep. We are coming down now, out of the frozen sky and its waiting Lord, into the present day, into a world that no longer kneels to the dragons, but has not entirely stopped reaching for what they had. There is a faith that still flickers on in the ruins, older than the Golden Order, older than almost anything still practiced, and it is a strange and troubling thing to look at closely. Let us look at it gently, the way you would look at something you understand the sadness of before you understand the details. It is called Dragon Communion, and at its center is a single terrible act: to draw the power of the dragons into yourself. In the age after their fall, you must eat their hearts, not symbolically, not in prayer. You take the heart of an ancient dragon and you consume it, and in doing so, you take a small portion of what that dragon was into your own body, the storm in its breath, the iron in its scales, the raw old power of the age it belonged to. The faithful gather at communion altars in the ruins, in a sea cave chapel on the coast, and in a broken church out in the poisoned east, and there they partake, one heart at a time, growing slowly stronger and slowly stranger with each one they take in. It is worth being honest about what this faith actually is underneath the reverence, because the game is honest about it, and this telling should be too. It is a way for the small to borrow the power of the vast, now that the vast are no longer here to grant it freely. In the age of dragons, no one needed to eat a heart to feel the dragon's power. The dragons simply were the power, present and living and ruling overhead, and to be near them was to be near it. Communion is what worship becomes once the thing worshipped is gone. It is the desperate afterlife of a faith whose gods have died, the faithful now consuming the remains of the very beings they once knelt to. Because eating what is left is the only way still open to feel a little of what it was once like to simply stand in their shadow. And it costs the ones who partake something they do not always understand they are giving up. Those who commune too deeply with the dragons begin, slowly, to stop being what they were. The power comes into them, but it does not come alone. It brings the dragon with it, a little more each time, until the human shape starts to give way, until the one who ate the hearts is no longer quite a person and not yet quite a dragon, caught somewhere between the two with no way back. This is the quiet horror folded into the whole practice, and it is stated plainly enough if you read the fragments the faith leaves behind. To take the dragon's power into yourself is to be slowly rewritten by it. You do not get to borrow that much of something so old and keep your own shape intact. Something has to give, and what gives is you. Sit with that a moment, because it is one of the truest and saddest patterns in this entire world. The people most devoted to the dragons, the ones who love that lost age so much they will eat its dead heart to feel close to it, are the ones the age undoes most completely in the end. Their devotion does not bring the dragons back. It only turns the devoted, one heart at a time, into hollow imitations of the thing they mourn. There is a figure or two among the ruins who has gone almost all the way down this road. More dragon now than person, still faithful, still communing, no longer able to say why, or even perhaps, to remember there was ever a self there to say it. That is what unanswered devotion looks like, given enough time. Not a reward, a slow disappearance into the thing you loved, which never once asked you to love it, and cannot even notice that you did. There is a gentleness available here, though, if you look for it, and it is worth naming before we move on. The dragon cult does not hate anyone. It does not conquer. It does not, unlike so many of this world's other faiths, build itself on the exclusion of some hated group. It is simply a small and dying community of the faithful, gathered in the ruins, mourning an age that ended before any of them were born, keeping alive a love for something enormous and gone. There is something almost tender in it, underneath the horror of the hearts. These are people who could not let the old gods go, and who found the only way left to hold on, and who are paying for that holding on with their own slow unmaking. You do not have to approve of the eating of hearts to feel, quietly, for the ones who do it. They only wanted to be near something that is never coming back. Most of us, in our own smaller ways, have wanted the same thing. It is worth drawing a careful line here, too, between two different ways this world has loved the dragons, because they are easy to confuse, and they end very differently. The communion of hearts is the newer and hungrier faith, the one that eats what remains. But there was an older way, from back in the age when the dragons still lived and ruled. When certain devoted people did not consume the dragons, but served them, and were granted, in return, a portion of the storm to wield as the dragon's own chosen faithful. These were the ancient dragon cult, and the knights who rode beneath it, and the lightning they carried was not stolen or eaten but given, taught to them by the dragons themselves as a mark of favor. Their storm was a gift, not a theft. That is a rarer and gentler thing than almost anything else in this history, a god that actually shared its power with those who served it, freely, while it still lived. You can still find the traces of that older cult in the incantations it left behind and the knights who once carried them, retainers who served the dragons as loyal companions rather than as scavengers picking at their remains. And there is a sorrow in the gap between the two faiths that is worth feeling for a moment. The old dragon cult served living gods who gave freely. The communion of hearts serves dead gods and takes what it can. The distance between those two is the distance between the age of dragons at its height and the age of dragons at its end, between worship that is answered and worship that has nothing left to answer it. The faithful themselves did not change. What changed is that the gods died and left the faithful holding a love with nowhere to put it except a heart to be eaten in the dark. Rest now. When we return, we will go to the place where the dragons still gather in the greatest numbers, out in the poisoned east, around the vast old body of a mother who has been chained there so long that even her children have forgotten what they are waiting for. Chapter 6. Greyoll and the Barrow of Her Children. Welcome back. Get comfortable, and let your breathing find the slow, even rhythm it takes on when you are almost, but not quite, asleep. Tonight's story goes now to a high plateau out in the east of this world, above a land of rot and ruin, a place the maps call the Dragonbarrow. It is where the dragons of the present age gather, what few of them remain, and at the center of that gathering there is a mother, and she is very old, and she has been bound there for longer than anyone still living can say. Her name is Greyoll, and she is called an elder dragon, which in this world is a way of saying she is old even by the standards of beings who measure their lives in ages rather than years. She is enormous, larger than the dragons that circle the skies elsewhere in this world. And she lies on the plateau surrounded by her brood, a cluster of smaller dragons gathered close around her, the way children gather close around a parent who can no longer stand. She does not attack. She barely moves. She is chained, held down by great bindings driven into the earth, and she has been held that way so long that the binding has become simply the shape of her existence. The mother of dragons pinned to a barrow, unable to rise, unable to leave, unable even to die. It is not entirely clear who bound her or why, and the story does not resolve it cleanly. Some readings hold that she was chained by the Golden Order in the aftermath of the war against the dragons, a captured matriarch kept alive as a kind of trophy or a source of power. Other readings hold that the binding is older and stranger than that, tied up with the dragon communion faith itself, her heart and the hearts of her children serving as the wellspring the whole practice draws from. Both readings exist. What survives clearly, underneath the uncertainty, is the image itself, and the image is enough. A mother the size of a hill, chained to the earth, her diminished children huddled around her, all of them waiting for something none of them could name if you asked, in a poisoned land under a sky that no longer belongs to them. Consider what the Dragonbarrow actually is, seen plainly. It is a nursery and a graveyard at the same time, and the two have grown indistinguishable. The dragons gathered there are the last of a ruling race, reduced to a huddle of survivors clinging to the body of their eldest, in a corner of a world that has been given over entirely to other powers. Above them, the Golden Order rules. Not far below them, the land drowns in scarlet rot, another age's tragedy bleeding across the map. And they remain on their high barren plateau, neither ruling nor dying, simply persisting, the way the truly ancient sometimes persist long past the point where persistence means anything. They are outcasts now, in the world their ancestors once owned. Every order produces them, and here is what the newest order did with the oldest one. It did not even bother to finish killing them. It simply chained the mother, let the children dwindle, and moved on, secure in the knowledge that time would do the rest. There is a particular grief in Greyoll herself that is worth pausing on longer than the story strictly requires. She is a mother who cannot protect her children, and cannot join them, and cannot leave them. She can only lie there, vast and bound, while they diminish around her, one by one, across an expanse of time so long it has worn the meaning out of the waiting. Whatever she once was, a ruler among rulers in the age of storms, is gone. What remains is only the endurance, the refusal or inability to end, the same curse that holds the Dragonlord in his frozen sky and the beastmen at their empty posts. This world does this to its oldest and mightiest figures again and again. It does not grant them the dignity of a clean death. It leaves them lying in the ruins of their age, too strong to fade and too diminished to rise, keeping a vigil that has forgotten its own object. Greyoll is that curse in the shape of a mother, and there are few things in the whole of this world sadder than the sight of her, chained and enormous, and surrounded by children who no longer remember what they are. It is worth noticing, too, how much power still sleeps in that old bound body, and what the world does with it. To end Greyoll, for those who come to the Barrow with the strength to do it, is to release an enormous flood of the old power she still holds, more of it, all at once, than almost any other single source in this world can give. The mother of dragons, even chained and dwindling, is still one of the greatest reserves of the old age's strength left anywhere in the land. And so she is hunted for it, the way everything of value in this world is eventually hunted for it. The last great matriarch of a ruling race becomes, in the end, a resource, a store of power to be spent by whoever is strong enough to take it. There is the whole logic of this world in a single image. Even a god chained to a barrow is worth more to the new order emptied out and spent than alive and remembered. Sleep well. When we return, we will go back into the deep past one more time, to the war itself, to the age when the Golden Order was young and hungry and set about doing to the dragons the thing every rising order does to the one it means to replace. Chapter 7. The War That Made the Golden Age. Welcome back. Let your breathing slow, and let the quiet of the room settle over you like a blanket pulled up in the dark. We have spent a long time now with the dragons as they are, waiting and chained and slowly unmade. Tonight we go back to how they fell, because the fall of the dragons is not a side story to the Golden Age that followed. It is the foundation that Golden Age was built on, and the Golden Order spent a great deal of effort afterward, making sure no one would remember that. When the Golden Order rose, under its great tree and its enthroned queen, the dragons were still present in the world, diminished from their ruling age, but far from gone, ancient and iron-scaled and immensely powerful. A new order cannot fully rule while the old gods are still flying overhead. So there was a war. The details of it are scattered and partial, told in fragments across old weapons and older memories, but the shape of it is clear enough. The forces of the Golden Order went to war against the ancient dragons, and after a long and terrible struggle, they won. The dragons were broken, their numbers shattered, the survivors scattered and driven to the margins of the world, to poisoned plateaus and frozen skies and glintstone lakes, where they have lingered ever since as the diminished remnants we have already met tonight. It is worth being precise about what winning meant here, because it was not a simple slaughter. The Golden Order did something cleverer, and in its way crueler than mere extermination. It took the dragon's power for itself, the storm lightning that the ancient dragons had wielded as their birthright. The red bolts that split the sky in the Age of Storms was learned, adopted, and folded into the holy arsenal of the New Order's own knights. The dragon's strength did not vanish when the dragons fell. It changed owners. It was stripped from the beings it had belonged to, renamed as a blessing of the New Age, and turned, eventually, against the last of the very creatures it had come from. There are knights in the Golden Capital to this day who wield the dragon's own storm as a sacred weapon, with no sense at all that they are carrying a stolen thing, because the theft was so complete and so long ago that the theft itself has been forgotten. This is the pattern this whole night keeps returning to, and here is its clearest and most consequential instance. The New Order does not defeat the old one so much as it consumes it, takes what it wants, and buries the rest. The dragons were not only beaten, they were harvested. Their lightning became the Golden Order's lightning. Their titles, Lord and Ring and the Binding of the World, became the Golden Order's titles. Their place at the center of the sky became the tree's place. And then the histories were written, so that all of it seemed to have begun with the gold, so that the children of the New Age would grow up believing the dragons had always been monsters at the edge of the map, rather than the gods who had ruled the center of the world and been robbed of everything, right down to the memory of what they were. There is a figure worth naming here, at the heart of the war, though his full story belongs to another night entirely, and this telling will only touch it. Among those who fought the Golden Order's campaign against the dragons was a golden prince, beloved and radiant, the firstborn of the queen's own line, and the war against the dragons is where he earned the shape of his legend. He fought the dragons, and he was extraordinary at it, and he became, in the doing, one of the most loved figures the Golden Age ever produced. Hold on to him lightly for now. We will return to him before the night is over, because what happened between that golden prince and one particular dragon is one of the tenderest and most heartbreaking threads in this entire history, and it deserves to be told slowly and in its proper place. For now, it is enough to know that the war against the dragons made heroes, and that the greatest of those heroes would come to a worse end than almost any dragon ever did. It is worth picturing, too, what such a war even looked like, because a war against gods the size of weather is not fought the way ordinary wars are fought. The Golden Order did not simply march soldiers at the dragons in hope. It brought its own oldest and strangest strengths to bear, the primal power of the crucible that its own knights still carried openly in those early days. Wings and horns and tails of holy fire, the Golden Age's own inheritance from the same primordial furnace the dragons came from. In a sense, the war against the dragons was the crucible turned against itself, the first shape of life used as a weapon against the oldest rulers of that same first world. And it was won, slowly, terribly, dragon by dragon. Each fall a battle that would have been a legend on its own in any lesser age. The Golden Order would go on, later, to be ashamed of the Crucible, to hide its horned and winged knights away as embarrassments, to insist that holy life came only in clean and separate forms. But in the war that made the Golden Age possible, it used the Crucible without hesitation. Because against the dragons, it needed every scrap of the old power it could gather. The order that would later exile its own crucible, born as monsters, was built, at its very foundation, on exactly their strength. Remember that phrase, built on exactly their strength, because you will meet those exiled crucible, born again in other nights. And it will matter that the order which cast them out could never have risen without them. Consider, too, what the war cost the ones who fought it on the losing side, not as an army, but one by one. Each ancient dragon that fell was not a soldier, but a god, or something close enough to a god that the distinction hardly mattered, a being older than the order that killed it, carrying inside it the memory of an age no one else could remember. When one of them died, an entire library of the deep past died with it, unrecorded, unmourned by the victors, gone. This is worth sitting with, rather than rushing past. We tend to count the cost of a war in the number of the dead, but some deaths are larger than others. And the death of something ancient takes more with it than the death of something young. Every dragon that fell in that war was a last witness to a world the Golden Order was busy erasing, and killing it did double work, ending the creature and ending, at the same time, the memory it carried. The war did not only defeat the dragons, it made sure the Age of Dragons could never be properly remembered by killing, one by one, everything old enough to remember it. Rest now. When we return, we will look at the single most defiant act any dragon ever made against the Golden World, when one of them flew against the very heart of the New Order's power, and at the strange monument that act left behind, still standing in the capital to this day. Chapter 8. The Spear in the Heart of the Capital. Welcome back. Settle in. Let the day finish letting go of you, thought by thought, the way it does when you stop holding on to it. Tonight's story goes now to the Golden Capital itself, the great walled city at the center of the New Order's power, because there is something lodged in the stone of that city, something enormous and out of place, that most who walk past it never think to question. It is a spear. It is far too large to have been made by any human hand, and the story of how it came to be there is the story of the last time the dragons struck back. In the age when the Golden Order was still consolidating its rule, one of the ancient dragons made war upon the capital directly. His name, in the fragments, is Grandsax, and he did not slink at the margins of the world the way the surviving dragons do now. He flew against the very seat of the New Order into the heart of its greatest city, and for a time he brought the storm of the old age crashing down upon the streets and towers of the new one. Picture what that must have been for the people of the Golden Capital, secure in the light of their tree and the rule of their queen, the sky itself turning against them. A god of the older world, iron-scaled and wreathed in red lightning, descending on the proudest city of the age that had tried to erase him, to remind it, one last time, what it had actually replaced. The capital held. The dragon was defeated, as the dragons always are in the end, and the Golden Order survived to go on ruling. But it is what the city did with the aftermath that says the most, and it is worth pausing on. Grandsax's great spear, the enormous bolt of his own lightning made solid, remained lodged in the stone of the capital where he fell, immense and unmistakable, far too large to remove and far too significant to hide. And so the Golden Order did what it does. It did not clear the spear away. It kept it as a monument, a trophy of the day the old world flew against the new one and lost, embedded forever in the heart of the capital as proof of the new order's triumph over the age it had overthrown. To this day it stands there, the spear of a fallen dragon, turned into an ornament of the very power that killed him. There is a bitter completeness to that image that rewards slowing down over. The dragon's last great act of defiance was folded, by the winners, into the decoration of their victory. His weapon became their monument. His rebellion became their proof. Even in striking back, even in flying against the heart of the Golden World, Grandsax ended up serving it his defiance repurposed into one more piece of the story the Golden Order told about its own inevitability. This is what happens to resistance in a world like this one when it fails. It does not merely lose, it is taken up by the victor and made to mean the opposite of what it meant, until the very spear that was thrown in anger becomes a quiet ornament testifying to how right the throne was to sit where it sits. Both things are true simultaneously. The spear is a symbol of the dragon's last great defiance, and it is a symbol of that defiance being completely and permanently defeated, and the two meanings live in the same piece of stone. It is worth remembering, too, the older peoples who lived in and around the capital before the Golden Order made it fully its own, because they are part of this same buried history. There were folk here who followed older ways, who worshipped older things, spirits and ancestors, and the primal shape of life itself, before the gold came and taught everyone a cleaner and more orderly faith. These older followers did not vanish when the Golden Order rose. They were pushed down, out of the bright halls and into the underground, into the sewers and the shadowed places beneath the shining city, where their descendants still keep their old rites in the dark. The capital, like everything else in this world, is built in layers. And if you go down far enough beneath its golden streets, you come to the traces of who was there before, the same way that if you go back far enough beneath the Golden Age, you come to the dragons. The city remembers what it has buried in its foundations, even as its rulers insist nothing was ever buried at all. Think, for a moment, about what it means to build your capital on top of your erasures and then to live in it as though the ground beneath you were solid and original and yours. The people of the Golden Capital walk past the dragon's spear every day without wondering what it truly represents. They walk over the buried faiths of the peoples who came before without knowing they are there. They live inside a story of golden inevitability that is held up, underneath, by everything that story was built to make them forget. This is not unique to them. It is how nearly every order in this world sustains itself, by living comfortably on top of what it has buried and teaching its children that the ground was always this shape. The dragons are only the oldest and largest thing under the floor. Once you know they are there, you start to notice how much else is down there with them. Sleep well. When we return, we will go beneath the world entirely, down into the eternal cities of the deep, where the dragons take a stranger form, and where their storm learned to carry, alongside its old lightning, the touch of something far colder and far more forbidden. Chapter 9. The Dragonkin in the Deep. Welcome back. Let everything slow down around you, and let the darkness of the room feel, for a little while, less like an absence of light, and more like a place you are safely held inside. Tonight we are going down, beneath the golden world entirely, into the deep places most who live in the light never see, and would not believe in if they did. There is a whole second world down there, older in some ways than the surface, and the dragons have a strange presence in it, and it is worth going slowly, because the deep does not reward hurry. Far below the surface of the lands between, beneath the roots of the golden tree, there are cities, not caves, not tunnels, but true cities, with towers and bridges, and a false starlit sky arching overhead, built by a people who were cast down out of the surface world long ago and made a home for themselves in the dark. They are called the Eternal Cities, and their people worshipped the night, the stars, the cold, clean distance of a sky the Golden Order had no use for. They were exiles, punished for reaching toward a power the Golden World feared, and they took that reaching underground with them and built it into the very architecture of their new home, a night sky of their own making, spread out beneath the earth, glittering over streets no surface sun would ever reach. We will not tell the whole of their story tonight. It belongs to another telling, but the dragons are woven through it, and that is why we have come down here. Among the ruins of the Eternal Cities, and in other deep and forgotten places, you find the Dragonkin. They are not dragons in the ancient sense, not the vast iron-scaled rulers of the Storm Age sky. They are something in between, draconic and humanoid at once, walking upright, carrying weapons, wearing the shape of the old dragons, folded down into something closer to a person's scale. The Dragonkin soldiers of the deep are ancient guardians, and they wield the dragon storm as their birthright, calling down lightning in the dark cities the way their vast ancestors called it down from the open sky. What they are, exactly, and how they came to be, the story does not fully resolve. Some readings hold they are a lesser kind of dragon, bred or diminished toward a more human form. Others hold they are the deep folk's own creations, shaped in imitation of the dragons they had heard of, but perhaps never seen. Both readings exist, and the deep keeps its secrets the way it keeps everything else, quietly and without explanation. But there is something the dragonkin of the deep carry that the dragons of the open sky did not, and it is the reason we have come all the way down here to find them. In the deepest and most forsaken of these places, the dragon storm has changed. The lightning some of these guardians wield is no longer the clean red bolt of the old age. It has taken on the touch of death itself, a darker and colder current, the storm of the dragons fused somehow with the one force this world tried hardest of all to seal away. Death touched lightning, wielded in the dark by draconic guardians standing watch over cities of exiles beneath the earth. It is one of the strangest and most quietly ominous things in the whole of this world, and it points, though it does not fully explain, toward a wound in this world's history that we will come to before the night is done. Sit with the strangeness of that for a moment, because it matters more than it first appears. The oldest power in this world, the dragon's storm, the birthright of the age before the gold, meets in the deep the most forbidden power in this world, the touch of true death, the thing the Golden Order broke its own ring to keep sealed away, and the two of them combine, down there in the dark, into something that should not exist, a lightning that kills, in the way the Golden Order swore nothing would ever be allowed to kill again. The deep is where the world's buried things go, and the world buried a great deal. And some of what it buried found each other down there and became something new. This is worth remembering as we climb back toward the light. The dragons are not only in the frozen sky and the poisoned plateau. A piece of their storm went down into the dark, met death there, and never came back up unchanged. It is worth noticing, too, that the deep is where this world puts everyone it cannot tolerate in the light. The night worshippers cast down for reaching toward the stars, the dragonkin guarding cities no surface power remembers, and, in places, the dead who were not permitted to stay dead, gathering in the dark because the surface had no room left for them. The deep is the great outcast country of this world, the place beneath the place, where everything the Golden Order swept off its shining floors ended up settling. The dragons have their exiles here alongside all the others. Every order produces its own castaways, and the deep is where this world keeps nearly all of them at once, layered together in the dark. Dragonkin and nightfolk and the restless dead, all of them equally forgotten by the light above. It is worth wondering, quietly, what it means that the dragons ended up here at all, split between the highest place in the world and the lowest. Their lord waits at the roof of everything, in a city floating in the sky. A piece of their storm went down into the deepest dark and met death there. Between those two extremes, the top of the world and the very bottom of it, there is the whole golden middle where ordinary life happens, and the dragons have almost no place left in it. They have been pushed entirely to the edges, up past the clouds and down past the roots, everywhere except the warm, lived-in center that the Golden Order kept for itself. That is how thoroughly a ruling race can be dispossessed. Not only defeated, but scattered to the geography of the forgotten, allowed to exist only in the places too high or too deep for anyone else to bother wanting. The dragons still hold territory in a sense. It is only that their territory is now the sky no one can reach, and the dark no one dares enter. The attic and the cellar of a house that used to be entirely theirs. Rest now. When we return, we will climb back toward that light, and we will meet the one dragon this world actually loved, and the one golden prince who loved him back, and we will see what became of that love when death came for the prince and the dragon refused, even then, to let him go. Chapter 10: The Prince and His Dragon. Welcome back. Get comfortable and let your breathing slow all the way down, because this is one of the tender parts of the night and it deserves to be met gently. We have talked about the dragons as gods, as rulers, as monsters harvested for their power, as guardians in the dark. Tonight, we talk about one of them as a friend. That is a rarer thing in this world than you might expect, and it does not end the way friendship is supposed to end, and it is, for exactly that reason, one of the most beautiful and sorrowful threads this whole history holds. We spoke earlier of a golden prince, the firstborn of the queen's own line, radiant and beloved, who earned his legend in the war against the dragons. His name, spoken softly, is Godwyn, and he is called Godwyn the Golden, and by nearly every account this world preserves, he was the kind of person the whole of a kingdom loves without having to be told to. His full story is not tonight's story. It belongs to its own night, and this channel will give it that night in time, the whole tragic length of it. But one piece of it is a dragon's story as much as a prince's, and so it belongs here too, and we will tell that piece and hold the rest in reserve. When the war against the dragons ended, Godwyn did something almost no other victor in this world has ever done with a defeated enemy. He made peace, more than peace. He befriended one of them, an ancient dragon named Fortissax, and the two of them formed a bond that went far past any treaty, a genuine friendship between a golden prince and a creature of the old storm age, the sort of bond that is supposed to be impossible between the new world and the old one it overthrew. Think about how rare that is, and everything we have said tonight. The Golden Order harvested the dragons, chained their mother, stole their lightning, turned their defiance into ornaments, and here, in the middle of all that taking, one prince simply befriended one dragon, and meant it, and was loved back. For a while, in one small place, the war between the ages actually stopped, and became something like affection instead. What Fortissax wanted, once that bond was formed, was simple, and it is what any true friend wants. He wanted to protect the one he had come to love. What that wanting would cost him is among the hardest things this world has to show you, and to understand it, you have to know only the barest shape of what happened to Godwyn, which is this. Godwyn was murdered. He was the first of the demigods to die, killed in a conspiracy this channel will tell in full on another night, and the way he was killed was uniquely terrible. It was not only his body that was struck, it was his soul, killed by a fragment of the very death the Golden Order had sealed away, so that Godwyn died in a way no one in this world was supposed to be able to die anymore. His soul destroyed while his body lingered on, neither living nor properly dead, the first and most grievous victim of a wound in the world's own law. And here is where the dragon's love becomes unbearable. When death came for Godwyn's soul, Fortissax did not abandon him. He went after him, down into the deathbed dream, where his friend's soul was dying, and he fought the encroaching death itself, trying to hold it back, trying to protect a soul that could no longer be saved. In doing so, he was tainted by the very death he fought, his old storm turning to that same cold death lightning we found in the deep, his ancient form warped into something between a dragon and a corpse, a lick dragon, keeping an endless battle in the dark against an enemy he could not defeat. For the sake of a friend he could not save. He is still there, in the deep beneath the roots of the world, still fighting. He never stopped. He simply kept faith, with Godwyn, past the point of death, past the point of hope, past the point where his own body remained fully his own. Sit with that as long as you need to, because it is the heart of tonight's quiet devastation, and it earns every second you give it. This is a story that lives in a few scattered lines and one battle in the dark, and it is more affecting than the entire plots of most other games. A dragon, one of the last of a ruined and harvested race, is befriended by a prince of the order that ruined his kind. The prince is murdered in a way that damns his soul, and the dragon, asked by no one, owed nothing, descends into death itself to try to hold the darkness back from his friend, and is deformed and death touched and half destroyed in the trying, and keeps trying anyway, forever, in a place no one will ever come to thank him. That is what love looks like in this world when it is real, not rewarded, not victorious, just faithful, past death, past hope, past the ruin of the one who loves, in the dark, where no one is watching. The most tragic figures in this world are the ones who devote themselves completely to something that cannot save them and cannot return what they give. Fortissax is one of the purest examples of it the whole history contains, and what makes him almost more painful than the human ones is that he did not have to. He was not born into the Golden Order's obligations. He was a free thing, an ancient dragon, a survivor of a slaughtered age who owed the Golden World nothing but grievance. And he chose love anyway, chose a golden prince over the memory of everything the Golden Order had done to his kind. And that free choice is exactly what doomed him. He could have flown away. He could have kept to the margins with the other survivors, chained mothers and frozen lords and glintstone warped descendants. Instead, he loved one person, and followed that person into death, and lost himself there. Both things are true simultaneously. It is the most beautiful thing a dragon does in this entire world, and it is the thing that destroys him. And this is where the two halves of tonight's story quietly touch, if you are still awake enough to feel the seam. Remember the death-touched lightning we found in the deep, the dragon's storm turned cold and forbidden in the dark beneath the world. This is a great deal of where it comes from. When the loyal dragon descended into his friend's dying dream and was tainted by the death he fought there, his ancient storm became that death lightning. The old power of the sky crossed with the one force the Golden Order swore would never touch anything again. The dragon's love is the bridge between the oldest power in this world and the most forbidden one. And the Golden Prince, for his part, did not die cleanly. His body lived on after his soul was killed, sinking down into the deep, becoming the terrible root of something that spread through the underworld, the first of those who live in death, a prince whose corpse would not stop being alive. That is its own long and sorrowful night, and this channel will give it in full another time. Tonight it is enough to know that the dragon followed the prince even into that, even into a death that was not allowed to be a death, and stayed, and is staying still. There is no bottom to how far he was willing to go. He went past life, and then past death, and then past the ruin of both, and he is still down there, in the dark, keeping watch over a friend the whole world has forgotten how to properly mourn. Sleep well. When we return, we will meet the last of the dragons as they are now, scattered across the whole of the world, each one carrying a fragment of the old storm, bent into a new and lonelier shape by the land that claimed it. Chapter 11, The Scattered Heirs of the Storm. Welcome back. Settle in, and let the quiet hold you. We have come a long way tonight, from the age before the gold, to the frozen sky, to the deep beneath the deep. Now let us simply walk the world as it is, gently, and greet the dragons who remain, the scattered heirs of the Storm Age, each of them a diminished god, still holding a little of the old power. Each of them alone in a corner of a world that used to be theirs entirely. Down in the green lowlands, where most journeys in this world begin, there is a dragon named Agiel who wheels above a drowned ruin, the first of his kind that most travelers ever see. He is not the greatest of the dragons, not by the standards of the age that made them, but to anyone meeting him for the first time he is overwhelming, a genuine ancient thing, red lightning in his breath, iron in his scale, the Storm Age suddenly and violently present in a world that had told everyone the dragons were only a legend. He is a reminder, planted early, that the Old Age is not as gone as the Golden Order pretends. It is still here, circling over the ruins, if you travel far enough from the safe roads to find it. Up in the high golden plateau there is Lansax, and she is worth pausing on longer than the rest, because she is one of the few who still remembers and still testifies. She is an ancient dragon of the old lightning, and she appears to those who seek her out not merely as a beast to be fought, but as something closer to a priestess of the vanished age, carrying the memory of the dragon's war and the dragon's faith into a present that has forgotten both. Through her and through the relics she leaves behind, a little of what the dragons actually believed still reaches the world. The old storm worship, the old grief, the old testimony about the age before the gold. She is a witness who outlived the things she witnessed, and there are few lonelier roles than that, to be the last one who remembers, in a world that has agreed to forget, and to keep telling the truth anyway, to whoever will come far enough to hear it. Out in the poisoned east, in the land drowned by scarlet rot, there is a dragon so consumed by that rot that his very name has become a description of his ruin, Exykes the Decaying, an ancient dragon whose old storm now comes wrapped in the sickness that claimed the land around him. He is one age's tragedy wearing another age's disease. The dragon's fall and the rot spread meeting in a single suffering body. This is what it looks like when the diminished heirs of the storm are claimed, one, by whatever newer catastrophe rules the region they were driven into. The dragon did not choose the rot. The rot simply found him where he had been left, at the margins, and made him one more thing it owned. In the glittering blue lakes to the west, there are dragons of a different caste entirely, the glintstone dragons. Their old draconic nature laced now with the cold crystalline sorcery of the academy that rules those waters. Smarog and Adula, they are called, and they wield moon and starlight the way their ancestors wielded storm. The dragon's power crossed with the magic of a wholly different tradition. One of them is bound up in the story of a certain cold witch and her plans for a different kind of sky, a thread that belongs to another night. What matters here is only the pattern, repeating again. The dragons who survived did so by being absorbed into whatever power claimed their new home. In the poisoned land, a rotting dragon. In the sorcerer's lakes, a glintstone dragon. The old storm survives, but never purely, always bent and recolored by the newer world it was forced to shelter inside. And in the frozen peaks at the roof of the world there are the last and coldest of them, a dragon wreathed in freezing fog, a great worm heavy with poison, the survivors driven to the highest and harshest edge of the map, as far from the warm golden center as it is possible to be driven and still remain in the world at all. They are magnificent, and they are alone. Each of them holds a territory no one contests anymore, because no one wants it. A frozen peak, a rotting swamp, a drowned ruin, the leftover corners of a world that gave its good ground to other powers long ago. The dragons rule again, in a sense. They simply rule only the places nobody else wanted, the margins and the wastes, the country of the forgotten. Consider all of them together for a moment, the whole scattered inheritance of the Storm Age, and what it adds up to. A first dragon over the starting fields, a witness on the Golden Plateau, a rotting god in the poisoned east, glintstone dragons in the western lakes, frozen worms at the roof of the world. Once, all of this was a single sky, ruled by a single kind of being, bound by a single ancient ring. Now it is fragments, one dragon here and one dragon there, each isolated, each claimed by a different disaster, none of them able to reach the others, none of them remembering, most of them, that there was ever anything to reach for. The Age of Dragons did not end in a single moment. It is still ending, slowly, one isolated survivor at a time, in the corners of a world that moved on without them. And every one of them is a door back into the deepest past, if you are willing to travel far enough, and brave enough, and quiet enough to hear what the last of the storm still has to say. It is worth marking one more distinction before we leave them, because this world quietly draws it, and it matters more than it first seems. Not everything scaled and fanged in the lands between is an ancient dragon. There are lesser things too, the worms, wingless and crawling, born of the earth and the magma rather than the storm and the open sky, closer to beasts than to gods. Some of them burn with fire drawn up from beneath the world. Some of them are twisted, half-formed things, more monster than lord. The true ancient dragons, the iron-scaled rulers of the old age, are something apart from all of these, and the game is careful to keep them apart, giving them their own reverent names and their own old lightning, while the worms crawl and smolder in the lower places. It is a small thing, a matter of naming, but it tells you that the dragons kept a nobility even their fall could not entirely strip from them. A rotting dragon in a poisoned swamp is still an ancient dragon, still a piece of the ruling age, still owed the particular grief we owe to fallen gods. A worm is only a worm. The difference is easy to miss and easy to dismiss, and it is exactly the kind of difference this world keeps insisting matters even when almost no one is left who still remembers why it should. To look at a diminished, rot-eaten dragon and still see the lord it once was, rather than the monster it has become, is a small act of remembrance, and remembrance, in a world built so thoroughly on forgetting, is never a small thing at all. Rest now. When we return, we will walk this world as the tarnished walk it, a small and mortal thing moving among these fallen gods, and we will come at last to the frozen sky, and to the Lord who has been waiting there, patiently, for the whole of the night. Chapter 12. The Small One Among the Gods. Welcome back. Let your breathing slow, and let the weight of the day go a little more completely than it has so far tonight. We have spent this whole night among gods and lords in the ruins of ages, vast things, ancient things. Now let us change our scale entirely, and walk this world the way it is actually walked, by someone small. A tarnished. A dead thing called back to life, weak at first, unremarkable. One more scavenger picking a path through the wreckage of powers that ended long before they arrived. That is the truest way to meet the dragons, in the end, not as an equal, as something small moving through the leftover country of the great. The tarnished meets the dragons early, and meets them as most of us meet the truly overwhelming things in life, without warning and without being ready. There is the first dragon over the drowned ruins in the green lowlands, wheeling and vast, and the encounter is not really a fight so much as an education. This is what the old world was. This is the scale of what came before. You were very small, and the storm is very old, and the ground you thought was safe is not as settled as the Golden Order taught you it was. Most who travel this world remember their first dragon long after they have forgotten 100 other battles, because it is the moment the map stops feeling like a place to conquer and starts feeling like a graveyard you are trespassing in. And then there is the choice, the one that quietly rhymes with everything we said earlier about the communion of hearts. The tarnished can find the old altars and the sea cave in the poisoned east, and can choose to partake, to eat the dragon hearts, to take the old storm into a mortal body and wield it as the dragons once did. It is a real power, and it is freely offered, and the game does not stop you or scold you for taking it. But it asks the same price of you it asks of everyone. To commune with the dragons is to become, a little, less yourself and more like them. The tarnished who eats enough hearts is walking the same slow road as the hollow cultists in the ruins, trading the human shape for the old power, one heart at a time. The game simply lets you decide how far down that road you are willing to go, and never once pretends the trade is free. I want to pause here for just a moment, quietly, the way you might pause a long walk to look back at how far you have come. If you are still with me, whether you are wide awake or three-quarters gone into sleep, thank you for that. I know these nights are long, and I know most of you will not hear the end of them, and that is exactly how they are meant to be used. If this kind of slow, careful company means something to you, then a like or following along on this channel, the Lord Den, helps more than I can easily say, and lets me keep making these long, quiet nights for whoever needs one. That is the whole of it. No urgency. Now let us go back to the ruins, and to the small one still walking through them. The tarnished passes the chained mother on her barrow, and the diminished dragons huddled around her, and if they are strong enough, they take from her the great flood of old power her bound body still holds. They pass the rotting dragon in the poisoned swamp, and the glintstone dragons in the western lakes, and the frozen worms at the roof of the world. Each one is optional. This is worth saying plainly, because it is one of the most telling things about how this world is built. Almost none of the dragons have to be fought. They are not gates across the main road. They are off to the side, in the margins, in the places you have to choose to go, guarding nothing that the main story requires. To meet the dragons at all, you have to want to turn off the golden road and go looking for the old age in the corners where it was left to rot. The ones who never turn aside will finish this whole world and barely know the dragons were here. That is not an oversight. That is the point. The old age is optional now. You have to seek it out, or it stays forgotten, exactly as the Golden Order intended. And for those who do seek, who go far enough and turn aside often enough, there is one last door, at the eastern edge of the world, up in the storm, that never ends. The tarnished climbs into crumbling Farum Azula, into the frozen falling city, past the beastmen at their empty posts, through the tear in time itself, and comes at last into the silent space at the eye of the storm, where the oldest lord in the world has been waiting since before the Golden Age began. Most who play this world will never come here. It is tucked away past a time warp, guarded by the endless storm, easy to miss entirely. But for those who arrive, it is one of the most solemn thresholds the whole game holds. And what waits on the other side of it is not really an enemy at all. Rest now. When we return, we will stand in that silent place with the tarnished in front of the Dragonlord himself, and we will ask what it actually means to disturb a vigil that has lasted longer than the world. Chapter 13. The Lord at the End of Time. Welcome back. Settle in one more time and let everything slow, because we have finally arrived where the whole night has been quietly walking since its first words. The frozen sky, the eye of the endless storm, the silent space where Placidusax has been waiting, and where the small one now stands before him, mortal and brief in front of something older than the world they both stand in. When the Dragonlord stirs, it is not the fury of a monster defending its horde. It is something slower and sadder than that. The rousing of a thing that has been still for so long that motion itself seems to cost it an effort beyond ordinary understanding. He rises, many-headed and vast, wreathed in the red lightning of the age before the gold, and for a few moments the storm age is present again. Whole and terrible and magnificent, in a way it has not been anywhere else in the entire world. This is what the sky looked like, once before the tree. This is what ruled here. For the length of a single encounter, in a pocket outside of time, the oldest age returns, and the small one who came seeking it gets to stand inside the last living breath of a world that ended before every other story in this history began. And here is the thing that the game does not say aloud, but builds into the whole shape of the encounter if you are quiet enough to feel it. This is not really a battle. It is the interruption of a vigil. Placidusax was not lying in wait for the tarnished. He was waiting for his god, as he has always been waiting, and the tarnished is not that God and never could be. Whatever passes between them in that silent place, it is not the clash of two enemies. It is a small, living thing walking in on the grief of an enormous ancient one and disturbing it, and in the end, whether by intention or not, releasing it. Because if the tarnished prevails, what actually happens is not a conquest, it is a mercy. The Lord who could not die and could not leave and could not stop waiting is at last allowed to stop. The vigil ends, not with the god's return, which was never coming, with an ending finally granted by a stranger who did not even know that was what they were giving. Sit with that, because it turns the whole encounter inside out. Everywhere else in this world, to defeat something is to take from it, to conquer, to add its power to your own. Here, to defeat the Dragonlord is to give him the one thing the entire world had denied him: rest, a conclusion. Release from a post he had kept faithfully for longer than the sky itself had held its current shape. The tarnished comes as an intruder and leaves, without meaning to, as the closest thing to a kindness Placidusax has known since his god departed. He wanted his lord to come back. His lord never came, and instead, at the very end, a small nameless wanderer arrived, and in place of the god who abandoned him, gave him the ending the god never would. It is not what he wanted. It is only what was actually possible. In this world, those two things are almost never the same, and the space between them is where nearly all of its grief lives. What does the Dragonlord's whole existence finally argue once you have stood in front of him and understood what you are really doing there? It argues the thing this world argues most often and most honestly, which is that devotion in this place is not answered, and that the most faithful are not saved by their faith, but slowly ruined by it. Placidusax kept perfect faith. He never wavered, never left his post, never stopped believing his god might return. And that perfect faith did not bring the god back, did not preserve his age, did not spare him the storm or the loneliness or the long erosion of even his god's name. It only kept him standing there, alone at the end of time, waiting for nothing, for so long that the waiting became the whole of who he was. There is no reward here for loyalty. There is only the loyalty itself, and what it costs, and the strange, terrible dignity of a creature who keeps faith anyway. Past all reason, past all hope, because keeping faith is simply what he is. And there is one more turn to it, quieter than the rest, that the whole night has been building toward. The tarnished who defeats the Dragonlord is walking a road that leads, if they follow it to the end, toward a throne and a title: Elden Lord. The very title Placidusax once held, in the age before the gold. The wheel that turned the dragons under and raised the golden order up is still turning, and the small one standing in the frozen sky is, whether they know it or not, a candidate to become the next lord of the next age, holding the same office the many-headed dragon held before the tree ever rose. Which means the tarnished is looking, in Placidusax, at a version of their own possible future. This is what an Elden Lord becomes given enough time. Abandoned by the god who chose him, outlived by his own age, reduced to a vigil in the ruins, waiting for a return that is not coming. The Dragonlord is not only the oldest thing in this world. He is a mirror, held up to everyone who reaches for the throne, showing them exactly what the throne is worth when the age it belongs to finally ends. And every age ends. That is the one thing this world has proven, over and over, all the way down. There is a mercy hidden in that, though, if you look for it, and it is worth holding on to as the night winds toward its close. If every age ends, then every vigil ends too, eventually, even the longest one. The Dragonlord could not end himself, and could not be ended by time, and could not be released by the god he waited for. But the world kept turning anyway, and the turning brought, at last, a small living thing to the eye of his storm, and the small living thing did what nothing else in all those ages had managed to do. It let him stop. This is the strange kindness buried underneath all the grief of this world. The same turning wheel that grinds every age into ruin is also the only thing that ever frees anyone from the ruin of the age before. Nothing lasts here. That is the sorrow of it. And nothing lasts here. That is also, if you hold it the right way, in the quiet, the mercy. Sleep well. When we return one last time, we will let all of it settle, the dragons and the storm, and the waiting Lord, and we will bring the night gently to its close. Chapter 14, What the Long Wait Was For. Welcome back. There is not much further to go tonight. Let your breathing slow all the way down now, and let the story begin to loosen its hold on you, the way a hand relaxes as sleep finally arrives. We have followed the dragons from the age before the gold to the frozen sky at the end of time. And before we let them go, it is worth gathering, softly, what the whole long story was actually about. The Age of Dragons was the first order this world ever had, or the first that anyone still remembers, and like every order that came after it, it produced its own outcasts and its own forgotten. The dragons ruled the sky, and something ruled them, and when the wheel turned they were overthrown. Harvested, chained, scattered, and written out of the histories, exactly as they had no doubt done to whatever came before them. That is the first thing this world keeps trying to teach. There is no bottom to it. Every order stands on the ruins of an older one and believes it will be the last, and is wrong. The gold will end too, someday, the way the storm ended, and something will build its own tree on the roots of the golden one and teach its children the world was always this shape. The dragons are simply far enough back that we can see the whole shape of it clearly. The rise, the rule, the fall, the forgetting. The most tragic figures in the Age of Dragons were the faithful ones, and this world is unusually honest about the fact that their faith did not save them. The cultists who ate the hearts and lost themselves. The dragon who loved a golden prince and followed him into death and was deformed by the following. The Lord who kept his vigil at the end of time for a god who would never return. Each of them gave everything to something that could not give anything back, and each of them was diminished, not rewarded by the giving. If there is a lesson in it, the game does not preach it, and this telling will not either. It only shows you, the faithful, and what their faith cost them, and lets you feel the weight of it, and leaves you to decide what to do with the feeling. And through all of it, the gods stayed silent. The nameless fell god that Placidusax served did not return, did not explain, did not spare a thought for the Lord it left behind. The greater will that raised the gold in its place is no different, distant and indifferent behind its own bright scripture. This is the third thing the dragons argue, and they argue it more purely than almost anyone, because their devotion was so complete, and its answer was so total a silence. The gods of this world are real, their power is real, and not one of them cares about any single person, or any single dragon, or any single age. They use, and they leave, and the ones who love them are left standing in the ruins, keeping faith with an absence, forever. To understand the dragons is to understand that this was always going to be the ending, from the very first kneeling in the very first age. Does the game tell you whether the Dragonlord's long wait was noble or merely pathetic? It does not. It refuses to. It holds both possibilities open and lets you carry whichever one you brought with you. Perhaps his vigil was the purest loyalty this world has ever seen, a faithfulness so total it outlasted even the name of the thing it was faithful to. And there is a kind of grandeur in that no throne could ever match. Or perhaps it was only a very old creature unable to let go, wasting an eternity on a god that was never worth it. A warning rather than an example. The lore does not resolve this cleanly, and it is not supposed to. That refusal is not the game failing to make up its mind. It is the game being honest about something it knows to be genuinely unresolved. The question of what devotion is worth when it goes unanswered, which is a question this world asks constantly and never once pretends to have settled. Both readings exist. Carry the one you need. What the dragons finally give you, if you sit with them long enough, is a way of holding your own smaller versions of all this. The age you belong to that has quietly ended. The thing you kept waiting for, long past the point where waiting made sense. The devotion you gave to something that could not give it back. You do not have to be a lord at the end of time to know the shape of standing at a post no one remembers assigning you. Keeping faith out of nothing but habit and love. The dragons make that feeling enormous and old and strange, and in making it so vast, they somehow make it easier to set down. Whatever vigil you have been keeping, you are allowed tonight to let it rest a little. The Lord in the frozen sky waited long enough for both of you. You can let your own waiting go soft now and sleep. Rest now. There is only the quiet left, and we will let it come. Chapter 15. Sleep Coda. Welcome back. Settle in. This is the last of it, and it will be brief. Let your body be heavy now, the pillow beneath your head, the blanket over you, the familiar dark of your own room, holding you the way it always does. Nothing here needs guarding tonight. The dragons are very old. They ruled and they fell. That is the whole of it, and it is enough. Somewhere at the edge of the world, a lord is still waiting. He does not mind. He has waited longer than this. Let him keep his vigil without you tonight. You do not have to wait for anything now. Not a return, not an ending, not a God who is not coming. You can simply lie here and breathe and be held by the quiet. The storm goes on, far away. It is not your storm. It never was. Thank you for spending this long night here, with me, with the old dragons and their older grief. It means more than you know. Let the last of the words go now. You do not need them anymore. You never needed to keep any of it. The dragons are sleeping too, wherever they are. The few that are left. Let them. Old storms, far away, nothing you need to listen for tonight. The sky is very old and very far, and you are here and warm and allowed to rest. Sleep well. Sleep well. There is nothing left to carry. Rest now.